Hello, everybody. My name is Lema Ijtemaye, and I'm the manager of the Social and Economic Development Department at Pauktutit Inuit Women of Canada, which is the national representative organization for Inuit women in the country. Today, we're going to be continuing to learn the topics covered in Lesson 3, in particular around impacts of gender-based violence on women's livelihoods and recommendations for stakeholders for the elimination of GBV in mining affected communities, with a particular focus on Inuit women in Canada. So the focus will be on resource extraction in Canada's north and the general well-being of Inuit women. As the national representative organization for Inuit women in the country, Pauktutit advocates for the safe and active participation of Inuit women in all levels of the labor market, including the resource extraction industry, which is particularly lucrative in the country's northern region. The organization has previously conducted studies which assess the impacts of extraction on Inuit women and their families and communities. These studies were initially conducted in Baker Lake, Nunavut, and the studies were both quantitative and qualitative in nature, and the final reports were produced in 2014 and 2016, respectively, which demonstrated the impact of the Meadowbank mine operated by Agnico Eagle in the north, and its impacts on the community. And both the qualitative and quantitative reports can be found on Pauktutit's website and are also linked in the course content. Generally, the research was conducted in conjunction with the University of British Columbia, and the data itself was collected by Inuit women themselves in order to ensure that the work was conducted in a non-invasive and culturally appropriate manner. The intention behind the research was to provide an organic snapshot of the gendered impacts of resource extraction, both positive impacts and negative impacts on the community of Baker Lake in particular. In order to achieve this objective, it was critical that Inuit women themselves conduct and lead the study and research. In collaboration with the University of British Columbia, or UBC, the researchers were trained to collect the data in the community. An important aspect to having Inuit women collect the data, in addition to ensuring cultural relevance, was to respect the fact that Inuit themselves are most familiar with their culture, language, and history. As a representative organization, we didn't want external, non-Inuit, non-Indigenous researchers to conduct this sensitive work. The collection of data by community members themselves abided by this core principle and acknowledgement that their experiences are their own and will be covered and presented by themselves as well. As covered in previous modules in Lesson 3, the central findings from Baker Lake research found that women identified, Inuit women in particular of the community, identified that significant problems were created by the Meadowbank mine operated by Agnico Eagle. The top 4 problems identified were an increase of alcohol consumption at 71.2%, language conflicts, 66.1% versus Inuktitut and English and/or French, more money being spent on alcohol and drugs at 64.4%, and a loss of traditional cultural practices. Respondents provided that figure at 64.4%. Racism at the mine was also noted by women who participated in the study at 57.6%. A significant percentage of responses also dealt with the serious issues for women. These included sexual harassment at the mine at 49.2%, and increased harassment in the community at 28.8%, as well as an increase in sexually transmitted infections at 45.8%, all attributed to the increase in transient workforces coming from southern Canada into the Arctic region, particularly the community of Baker Lake in Nunavut. A lack of adequate and responsive childcare and difficult interpersonal relationships, including increased verbal and physical violence towards women, as well as the responsibility for other family members, were noted to affect the capacity of Inuit women to fully participate in the mine employment and take full advantage of that lucrative opportunity that's a staple for the economy in Canada's north. Respondents also indicated that crimes related to substance and alcohol misuse had increased. Violence and assaults against women and children that involve drugs and/or alcohol have reportedly increased since the mine opened in the community of Baker Lake. The arduous and difficult fly-in and fly-out schedule, because of the lack of critical infrastructure in that part of the country, placed a lot of strains on family dynamics and interpersonal relationships in the community itself. The problems identified are even more serious when paying attention to the way that Innu women rated community services available to deal with them. Again, citing the lack of critical infrastructure, which also includes access to very much needed healthcare and mental health care supports. Suicide prevention services were not given a high rating. Mental health services were rated as largely as so-so or largely inadequate. Health services were rated negatively by 44% of respondents, with a further 28.8% regarding them as so-so or slightly adequate. However, the most negative ratings were to childcare, with 56.6% rating services negatively, along with the availability of programs and spaces for Inuit women to access. Childcare services available in Inuktitut and the creation of a cultural center for the transmission of cultural and traditional knowledge were rated as top priorities and immediate requirements for Inuit women in the community who both work at the mine site and or reside in the community and are affected by the impacts of the operation. The Baker Lake research has provided a foundational basis for additional work to be done by Pauktutit in relation to resource extraction and Inuit women's well-being. A current project right now, which is being funded by the federal government of Canada, has delivered a literature review which analyzes the current extraction operations across Canada's north, so beyond the community of Baker Lake and across all 4 regions of Inuit Nunangat, across Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Northern Quebec, and Northern Labrador, which can be accessed on Pauktuit's website. So the literature review looks at the impacts of operations across Canada's north on Inuit women, their communities, and it also offers policy recommendations for all stakeholders and relevant actors involved. In sum, the literature review aims to ensure that Inuit women's economic prosperity, safety, and security are secured and procured, and it proposes the following recommendations and actions. It proposes that grievance mechanisms must be designed by Inuit women, that gendered community consultations and impacts must be a requirement in all agreements and Inuit benefit agreements and operation agreements. It proposes that assessments must be conducted prior to the formulation of Inuit benefit agreements or IBAs. It proposes that all relevant stakeholders must be included, namely women and community members in all phases of the impact benefit agreement development, including negotiation, renegotiation, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting processes. The review also recommends a larger role for federal, provincial/territorial, and regional representative organizations regarding the regulation of industry activities and procedures, and it also recommends the development and/or amendment of existing workplace policies and procedures to effectively address the issue of workplace sexual harassment and violence. This project, in addition to the literature review, has also conducted surveys across targeted communities in Canada's north by speaking to Inuit women who have previously and/or are currently working at extraction sites in the country's north, largely looking at their responses around treatment of Inuit women in the workplaces, the rating or their assessment of the efficiency of workplace policies and procedures in relation to safety and sexual harassment, and it also assesses their rating of services available on site. The final report of those surveys is hopefully it is intended to be finalized within the coming months and also will be available on Pauktuit's website in addition to being shared and disseminated with all stakeholders at the federal, territorial, and provincial and local levels, as well as with other civil society actors. All information cited in this current lecture can be accessed publicly at PAUTT's website at www.pautt.ca, and I am the person responsible for these projects and can be contacted as well if there are any questions or concerns. Thank you very much for your attention and for having me be part of these lecture series.